In the gray hours before dawn, somewhere in the North Atlantic, a tired radio operator leaned closer to his headphones and heard something he wasn't supposed to hear. A short, tight burst of Morse, buried in static, then a call sign he recognized. It was a U-boat contact report. Clear, urgent, impossible to confuse. He logged it, stamped it, pushed it up the chain. Hours later, that same report came back down with 2 red words across the top. False alarm. The convoy kept moving. Days later, only some of those ships would still be afloat. 1942. North Atlantic, it is just before dawn. The sky a low metal ceiling pressing down on a strip of cold water, where men are trying to keep each other alive. On one of the smaller escort ships in a long zigzagging convoy, a young radio operator leans nearer to his headphones and frowns. The static he has been listening to all night, that endless ocean of hiss, suddenly shapes itself into something sharp and deliberate. Short bursts. Precise timing. A rhythm he has learned to recognize the way other people recognize faces. It is not friendly. It is not random. It is a U-boat contact report. He writes it down, hands shaking a little from fatigue and from something more primitive. A low animal fear that comes when you realize something in the dark has just spoken. He logs the message, stamps it, sends it up the chain. Hours later, that same sheet of paper will come back to him with 2 red, casual words slashed across the top. False alarm. The convoy will keep sailing. And days later, scattered across miles of cold ocean, you will be able to trace exactly where those red words turned from ink into wreckage. The story you are about to hear isn't really about steel, or tonnage, or even tactics. It is about a signal that was heard clearly and then smothered under routine. It is about human beings trapped between fear of the enemy and fear of being wrong. And it is about what happens when the one warning that could have changed everything is quietly filed away and forgotten, until the sea itself forces everyone to remember. Picture the convoy first. A loose, moving city of ships. If you could see it from above, heavy merchant vessels loaded with fuel, food, ammunition, and everything else that keeps a war breathing. Around them, like worried shepherd dogs, small escort ships, corvettes, destroyers, converted trawlers that have been dragged from a civilian life into a new one, where their job is simple and impossible at the same time. Keep the wolves away. The North Atlantic in 1942 is a hunting ground. Beneath the waves, U-boats move like patient knives. On the surface, the convoys try to slip past, trusting in code books, radio silence, and men who are barely sleeping. On one of these escorts sits Thomas Hale, 22 years old and already aged by months at sea. He is not a captain. He is not a strategist. His war is fought through a headset, with a pencil, and with the constant strain of trying to hear meaning inside noise. All night long he has been listening to the same chorus. Faint Allied transmissions, bouncing weirdly over the horizon. Bursts of weather reports, occasional nervous jokes from other ships, and, underneath everything, the restless roar of the North Atlantic itself. He knows the pattern of that roar. He knows how normal static sounds at 2 in the morning when your yes are burning and your neck aches. So when the pattern changes, even slightly, his whole body notices. It begins as a faint click, like someone tapping on glass from very far away. Then it sharpens, condenses into dots and dashes that ride on top of the noise. At first he thinks it might be their own traffic, distorted. But the call sign is wrong. The spacing is wrong. And then he hears a particular group of characters that he has seen circled in red on training sheets. A known German naval indicator. For a moment, he just stares at the wall in front of him, watching the paint blur. His hand reaches for the logbook almost automatically. He writes down what he hears, line after line. The message is short, maybe 30 seconds in all. But in those 30 seconds, it sketches out a position, mentions a bearing, and uses a code group he's been told is associated with U-boats reporting contact. He goes over it twice before he calls his watch officer. The man steps into the cramped radio room, smelling of cigarette smoke and cold wool, and bends over the log. He does what experienced officers often do around nervous junior ratings. He tries to calm the situation by assuming it is less important than it feels. Are you sure about this call sign, Hale? Could it be Allied? Could the bearing be off? Hale explains what he heard. The way the tone cut through the static, the cadence that doesn't match their side's traffic. The officer nods slowly, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. All right, log it as an intercepted enemy transmission, flag it, and send it to the operations room. Let them sort it. The message leaves the radio room and enters a different world. In the operations space, the air smells of graphite and coffee. Charts are spread under red lamps. Pins mark the convoy's projected course. Other pins, in different colors, mark suspected U-boat positions reported over the last few days. Men are tired and behind schedule. There have been other reports tonight. One corvette thought it saw a periscope wake that turned out to be driftwood. Another escort swore it had a sonar contact that vanished as soon as they dropped depth charges. Every time something like that happens, someone has to write it up, send it higher, and wait for the response. Sometimes the response is praise for vigilance, sometimes it is a pointed reminder not to waste charges, fuel, or nerves on ghosts. Hale's intercept lands on a desk that already holds a stack of messages. The staff officer who picks it up has been awake for more than 20 hours. He reads the penciled lines, frowns at the coordinates, and glances up at the chart. If the intercept is accurate, it suggests a U-boat, either ahead of the convoy's path or paralleling it. It could be crucial. It could also be a misheard training signal, a German decoy, or a reflection from some relay station half a world away. The officer thinks about the other times operators have sworn they heard enemy traffic that later turned out to be nothing. He also thinks about how many times higher command has questioned his judgment when he forwards too many ambiguous reports upstream. He walks the message a few steps over to another man, older, yawning, who specializes in signals intelligence. This man shrugs as he reads. "We don't have a match in our current schedule for that call sign at this hour," he says. "Could be them, could be a replay, could be someone's equipment acting up. Where's the source?" "A junior operator on an escort. They're all hearing U-boats in their sleep right now." He taps the paper with a finger. "Log it as unconfirmed. We've seen a lot of supposed positions tonight. If we react to every one, the whole screen will chase shadows and leave the convoy uncovered." So a decision is made, not with malice, not with stupidity, but with the dull, heavy logic of men who have run out of capacity to treat every warning as life or death. The officer takes a red pencil from a mug and writes 2 words across the top of the page. False alarm. It is not meant to be cruel. It is meant to be administrative shorthand, a label for filing, a way to say, this can be set aside, at least for now. The message is sent back down the chain until it lands again on Hale's desk. When he sees the words, something in his chest tightens. He doubts himself for a moment. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe fatigue made the dots and dashes dance into shapes they didn't really have. But the thing about a label is that it doesn't change reality. Somewhere out in the darkness, under the freezing skin of the Atlantic, a long gray shape is moving. Inside it, men in cramped compartments breathe stale air and listen to their own instruments. The captain of this U-boat has been tracking the convoy for hours, only surfacing briefly to confirm bearings against the stars before slipping back under the waves. When he transmitted his contact report, he did it quickly, nervously, knowing that Allied direction-finding stations might triangulate his position. He did not know that on the other side of the ocean, someone had actually heard him and been overruled by red pencil. The convoy continues its course. Daylight steals over the horizon, turning black water into a bruised slate color. Hale leaves his post, eats a hurried breakfast in the mess, and tries not to think about the message. Other tasks crowd in. There are status checks, scheduled transmissions, routine chatter to monitor. Hours pass. At some point, the escort group receives general orders to adjust their formation, but nothing that explicitly mentions a confirmed U-boat threat ahead. The ships zigzag, as they have been doing for days, burning extra fuel to avoid presenting straight lines to torpedo sites. The crew settle into that uneasy rhythm where danger feels both close and strangely hypothetical, like a storm that might or might not actually break. 2 nights later, the storm arrives. The first ship to be hit is a tanker near the center of the formation. In the early hours, when many men are in their bunks but no one is really sleeping deeply, a torpedo slams into its side with a sound that some survivors later describe as the world being split open. A dull thud from far away, then a crack, then a roar, as fuel ignites. Hale is thrown against the wall in his radio room. Alarms begin to howl across the escort. He braces himself and listens as the airwaves explode into confused shouting. Distress calls, fragmentary reports, ship hit in column 3, midships, heavy fire, and overlapping orders to maintain discipline on the net. The U-boat captain has chosen his moment well. He fires more torpedoes in quick succession, then dives hard and turns, using the noise of the explosions and the chaos to mask his escape. Other ships turn their guns toward the flashes, but there is nothing to shoot at except black water and burning oil. Within minutes, another merchantman staggers, listing heavily as a second torpedo finds its mark. Men plunge into the freezing sea, some already on fire when they hit the water. In the radio room, Hale is trying to maintain a clear log of who is calling for help, which ships are reporting hits, and what the escorts are being ordered to do. There's a particular horror to hearing disaster unfold via headphones. You can't see the burning deck or smell the smoke, but the voices carry something even more piercing, the moment when calm procedural language fractures into raw fear. Hale hears it in the way certain callers suddenly shorten their words, in the way someone starts to say a code group and then switches to plain language because they know they are out of time. Above him, depth charges begin to roll off the escort's stern, exploding with gut-punch thumps that make the whole hull vibrate. The crew hopes to box the submarine in, force it away from the convoy, but the ocean is big, and sound bends strangely in it. What feels precise on a plotting board is guesswork in 3 dimensions of cold darkness. By dawn, the attack is over. The U-boat has slipped away. Some of the escort captains swear they had solid sonar contacts at least once, and may have damaged the submarine. No wreckage rises to confirm it. What can be confirmed is simpler and heavier. Several ships are gone, reduced to slicks of oil, rafts of charred debris, and clusters of survivors shivering in lifeboats. Others limp along with damaged hulls, their speed reduced, making them more vulnerable in the days ahead. The convoy slows to regroup. A head count is taken. Names that were on the roll yesterday are now marked as missing, maybe dead. In the hours after the attack, as the immediate crisis gives way to frantic paperwork, boards of inquiry begin forming in miniature on every ship. Captains and staff officers ask each other the same questions. Did we have warning? Were there any prior reports? Could we have altered course sooner? In the operations room where Hale's intercept was first downgraded, men begin flipping back through logs. They are not looking for anything specific at first, just trying to reconstruct the sequence of contacts and messages over the past 72 hours. And then someone finds it, a penciled entry from 2 nights ago, detailing a German transmission that mentioned a position uncomfortably close to the convoy's present location at that time. The message is attached to a sheet bearing those 2 red words. False alarm? For a while, no one says anything, they just stare at the page, the way survivors sometimes stare at the space where a ship used to be. The staff officer who wrote the words feels a sour weight in his throat. He remembers his reasoning at the time. Too many ambiguous reports, too much strain on the escorts, no firm confirmation. He did not know this particular U-boat was real. He did not know it would hit them here, now. But that does not matter much to the men who have just pulled half-frozen sailors out of the water. The line between justification and guilt is suddenly thinner than paper. Word spreads, quietly at first. Someone mentions the intercept in a debrief. The convoy commander requests the full file. Hale is called in to answer questions, his logbook under one arm. He sits in front of officers he has only seen from a distance and explains again what he heard that night, how the message cut through the static, how he was sure of the call sign. They listen, they nod, they write things down. One of them asks if he might have been mistaken, if fatigue could have played tricks on his perception. Hale hesitates, then says what he has been turning over in his mind since the attacks. If I was wrong, sir, then that U-boat got very lucky choosing where to be wrong. Officially, the after-action reports phrase it differently. They talk about the fog of war, about the difficulty of interpreting signals intelligence under pressure, about the strain on overworked operators and officers. They note that yes, there was an intercepted transmission that might have indicated U-boat presence, but that its origin could not be confirmed, and that similar false positives had recently led to wasteful deployments of escorts. They recommend better training, improved equipment, more coordination between direction-finding stations. No single person is blamed outright. The words false alarm never make it into the final summary. They are replaced with phrases like not actionable and uncorroborated, but the C, indifferent to language, has already compiled its own report. It exists in the form of family letters that will never be answered, in the steady creep of names onto memorial walls, in the memory of men who watched ships burn beside them in the dark. For Hale, the radio operator, the phrase false alarm lodges somewhere deep and poisonous. Every time he hears a scratch of possible enemy traffic afterward, a part of him remembers that night and pushes him to triple-check, to over-report rather than under-report. The officers above him, stung by criticism, respond by becoming more cautious in the opposite direction, determined not to ignore any more significant intercepts, even at the cost of chasing more ghosts. The pendulum swings, as it often does in wartime, from one extreme to the other, leaving people crushed in both arcs. The full implications of what happened in that convoy only emerge years later. When wartime archives begin to open, and independent historians compare German and Allied records, cross-referencing U-boat patrol logs with convoy routes, someone reconstructs the exact position of a particular submarine on the night Hale made his intercept. The match is chillingly close. The German log records a brief, hurried transmission reporting visual contact with a convoy at long range, followed by a note of frustration that subsequent radio discipline rules prevented any further chatter until after the attack. The Allied file, sitting quietly in a different building, contains Hale's translation of that very message, with the same course coordinates, the same bearing. Between the 2 sets of pages sits the red label that turned a warning into a piece of trivia. When these documents are published, decades after the last survivors have grown old, readers tend to focus on the irony. Here was proof, they say, that the Allies had all the information they needed and still lost ships. It fits a comfortable narrative about bureaucratic blindness. But the reality is both more mundane and more frightening. No one in that operations room wanted ships to sink. No one wanted to be wrong in that direction. They were simply overwhelmed by noise, working inside systems that punished the wrong kinds of mistakes and quietly rewarded others. In that environment, it can feel safer to doubt the one clear human voice in your headphones than to stake your career on it. Maybe that's why this story still matters. Far outside a cold patch of ocean in 1942, you don't have to be a sailor or a historian to recognize the pattern. A warning that doesn't fit expectations. A chain of command that is too tired or too rigid to adapt quickly. A label slapped on something complex so that everyone can move on. Sometimes the cost of that decision is measured in missed opportunities, embarrassing headlines, or financial loss. And sometimes it is measured in metal scattered across the seabed, in men who never come home. So the next time you see wartime footage of convoys plowing bravely through gray waves, imagine, just out of frame, the invisible threads binding those ships to small rooms full of humming equipment and exhausted operators. Remember that victory or loss often hinged not just on guns and armor, but on whether one faint signal heard by one person at the right time was believed. If this story pulled you into that world for a few minutes, do me a favor, tap the like button so the algorithm doesn't mark this one as a false alarm too. Subscribe to the channel if you want more long-form wartime mysteries and forgotten signals like this one. And if you're ready for another journey into the darker corners of history, there's another story on your screen right now. Just click it, and I'll meet you there.